Hey everyone, this is Priyanka Sanghvi, and for today's topic, I want to talk about innovation in product management. And let me talk about what the key takeaways would be from this slide that I want to take. I want you guys to take is what is innovation actually? I know innovation is a word that's being used so widely. Every now and then people say, let's do innovation or things like that. So I do want to make sure that we are all on the same page on what that innovation word means. Secondly, why do we need innovation in product management? What's the use for it? And then lastly, I want to include how do we include innovation in product management? Are there any techniques? Are there things that we should be looking at and stuff like that? So to begin with, what is actually innovation? But before I start, let me give a brief background about myself. I have done bachelor's in electrical engineering, and I have done my master's in global innovation management. I have about 10 years of experience in tech industry with 7+ years in product management. I started as an engineer, I moved to project management, then moved to product management, and I am hoping that something different is going to come after this. Obviously, I don't see product management as my end. I think it's just a step to the next career opportunity for me. I am mostly focused on solution-based products for my entire career life, which also means like hardware and software. I personally love having hardware products in my hand so that if they don't work, I can throw it out the window. So that's why I've always been towards the hardware and software aspects of the product. I put down my passions. I think they're more my interests, but sometimes I do get really passionate about one, innovation, doing product process innovation, running ideation sessions, taking a handkerchief sketch and running it with turning it into prototype and then commercializing it. So just that whole journey, I have enjoyed it so much. I feel like I learned so much. I personally and professionally grow with it. So that's just somewhere I always gravitate towards. And then secondly, customer interviews, or you can say user interviews also. Sometimes when you have designs and then you go with it, I love that gives me a different perspective of how you have to be detached to your designs, to hear, to listen, and implement those perspectives from the customer side into your product. So I've always loved it because they say something and I'm like, oh, I did not think of that. So things like that. I've always loved going into customer interviews, whether it's conducting them, sitting at the back and listening to them, or anything like that. And currently, I work as a senior product manager at Microsoft on the Surface side. So again, as I said, hardware and software. I don't think I can ever give that up right now, at least right now. So digging into it, what is innovation? You know, a lot of times when you go into work, a lot of people say, let's innovate on it, let's brainstorm on it. But is that the right thing? And let's make sure that everybody understand innovation is not invention. Even when we have innovation, sometimes we're like, this already existed. So what's new in it? Again, it's not an invention. Invention is something completely new, like a new technology or something like that. But that's not what innovation equals to. Innovation is also not just simply change. It is change that creates value. So it could be a change in the process, in the profit model, or anywhere which brings a new process in place, a new business model in place, and that brings value to the business or to the product, or even to the employees, come to think of it. That's where innovation is. Innovation occurs when, two times, when a currently unsolved problem is solved, which is fundamentally changing the way that things are done. So maybe there's a new way to do things for an unsolved problem, or a new solution to an existing problem just comes out, which is better than the previous solution. And as I mentioned over here, better can be a faster way, like more better performance, a cheaper, better price, easier to use, better in user experience, user ease of use, or more reliable. And I think there's a ton of other words that I can use to describe it, but it's just better. And it could be different ways, different companies, different products can define it in a different way. So that's what we want to keep in mind when we talk about innovation is how do we make sure that there's a better process, a better product, or better culture, and things like that. Why do we need innovation in product management? So let me start by saying, I don't know how much you remember, but if you remember these companies, you will remember what had happened to them. So first of all, Kodak. They were they were at a peak in um, the camera business, taking pictures, film business. They had their own technology. They were making tons of money. The digital camera came out, and people thought that the digital camera made Kodak go away, but actually that's not true because Kodak was one of the first one who internally had developed a digital camera. So they knew that technology very well. They just did not go ahead and pursue that technology because they were afraid that they would cannibalize their film business. And why did they think that? Because they forgot that they were in storytelling business, and instead they thought that they were in filmmaking business. So they were very focused on to say this is the technology that we use, and this is how we are going to do it. Being very focused on technology a lot of times brings restriction, a constraint to innovation within the company and leads to the downfall of the product, the company, the business, and we know what has happened to Kodak. The next is Blockbuster. Again, Blockbuster, a place where you could rent movies, great places. I remember we used to go in there and look at all the different movies that we could rent for the weekend. And eventually we saw that went out of business. And a lot of people say, oh, it's because of Netflix that Blockbuster went out of business. Actually, that's not really true. When Netflix came out, there was a way that Blockbuster and Netflix both could exist with 50% market share. And Blockbuster was also given the opportunity to buy Netflix, but they did not. Why? They thought that Netflix streaming movies is not the way, or streaming videos is not the way the future is going to be. And that was the wrong strategic move. Again, as I said before, innovation is not about just a product. It's also about how do you strategically see and look at the future. It could be a new technology, and it could be just a new company coming in, and you want to make sure that you are participated in it as a business. So they went out of business because they did not make the right strategic moves. Going with BlackBerry, they had the game-changing ARC keyboard. They were one of the top ones. It was so famous. Everybody loved it, at least at the enterprise level. And they were too focused on that technology. Why did they fail? They didn't want to move from their game-changing keyboard to the touchscreen. Again, it's all smartphone, but that subtle change, it's a very small change on the keyboard and the touchscreen if you look at the grand scheme of things, but they didn't make that change. And when they saw that rising, they still did not get on that boat. So if you think about it, if they had done the touchscreen earlier, they might have been in business for now. And then the next one is newspaper. I remember I used to love those newspapers where you can sit and open and just the smell and of it, reading news. And they went out of business because you could get all the digital news. For newspaper, they honestly thought that they were in printing business, which is not true. They forgot they were an information business. Providing information, newspaper was just a method. They could provide information in any different ways. Digitally also, they could do really good by providing that information. So at the end of it, I think there are a ton of other companies that if you want, you can think of Nokia, Toys R Us, Borders, and there's so many more that if you look at it, a lot of times they forget what business they are in, and they're so focused on the product, and they don't look at the vision of where the company is going and things like that. And that's where innovation is really helpful. So why am I bringing the product lifecycle? Because as a product manager, it's our job to look towards the future to ensure our product won't be obsolete the moment it launches. Again, we think that, okay, as a product manager, we have launched the product and that's it. Our job is done. That's actually not true. That's only part of the job. The next part of our job as a product manager is how to make sure it sustains, we reach the peak, and after that, how can we extend the lifetime of the product? And that's where innovation comes in. So if you see that green circle over here, you will realize that this is the time you can do innovation. As soon as you launch the product, you can get on doing innovation on a process, the way product is manufactured, or it's taken to customers, or any other way, or maybe like a slight technology change, until it starts declining. Once it starts declining, it's really hard to do innovation and bring that up. Not saying that that's not possible. That is possible. I think there are companies who have done it, but it is really hard at that point, and that requires a lot of investment, resources that a company is willing to put in. So let's look at the 10 different types of innovation. I have so many companies put over here, but what I want everyone to focus on is there are different types of innovation that can happen in different sectors. So for example, it could be in a profit model, which is what New York Times did. They were in the ad-driven media model, and they changed it to digital user subscription model. That's one way to do it. Again, if you look at product performance, we always think about we need a new technology. Not necessarily. We can improve the performance, innovate on it, which is what Spotify did. Created a seamless music streaming product that lapped competitors in terms of speed, responsiveness, and user experience. Finally, we can also innovate in brand sector as well. And the perfect example for that is Patagonia. Obviously, we all know how Patagonia is, how they work, but it's their the next one I do want to talk about is the brand sector. And I think the perfect example is Patagonia. What Patagonia did is in their brand activism, it linked to the environmental causes, and it gives itself a unique position in the outdoor apparel market. So if you think about it, North Face, Patagonia, Columbia, Patagonia definitely made a different positioning for themselves, and that's just innovation. Again, if you look at in the service sector, again, Amazon Prime, what did they do? They made free expedited shipping, which can have products come as fast as within 2 hours, which was unthought of. Did they change their technology? They did not. Did they change the way they were giving that to customers? Not really. They had shipping available. Now they went a step ahead and said, okay, this is the problem people are having. How can we help them more? So there's a ton of different examples, and these are just some examples that I have thought of, but I am sure that a lot of other companies do this innovation on a daily basis, not so at customer level, but also internally on the employee side, like Google does, giving that 20% time to their employees. Again, that's more internally. How did that affect their business? That's a whole different story, but that's how innovation works. So finally, I do want to point out what the benefits are, but at the same time, we always have risks. So if you think about it on the benefit side, it definitely improves productivity if we bring innovation in the business, reduce costs. It could be like we discover new markets and opportunities. We improve morale in the company, better customer experience, and things like that. But at the same time, we have also heard that 95% of innovations fail, which is quite a high number. And the reason it is because there are ton and ton of risks over here. like it can impact other areas. As I said, not all innovations are successful. Sometimes they're great ideas, but you can't just implement them. They are very expensive. A lot of innovations requires a lot of investment, from money to time to just human resources to invest in it. And then it also sometimes reduces job security, because now you're bringing a different way to do things, much maybe a better and simpler way to do things, which might affect the job security. Lack of ROI. Sometimes we don't know how much these innovations can bring the ROI. And it's always, I feel like, in every situation, it has always been, there's always an estimate, but when nobody has any idea, this is what is going to make it successful. So it's always a risk that we're looking at. And then obviously unfulfilled expectations. So I know the leaders always believe that, oh, you do innovation and it's going to be great, we're going to make millions, or it's going to look good on our customer, or the process is going to be great. But honestly, not always that happens. We might, with innovation, reach part of the problem and solve part of the problem. So there's always unfulfilled expectations that happens with innovation. So I think it's better to keep in mind that when you start innovating, you might not find success right away. As it says, 95% fail. It's like 1 in 20 startups are successful. And that's a very low number, because you can start with an idea, you can build it. Sometimes it's hard to build it because technology is not there. Sometimes it's hard to build because you don't have the money. And sometimes you build it, but it doesn't meet the target market and their problem. So I think there's tons of problems in there, and then there's tons of risk, but that doesn't mean we don't innovate. I think the idea to think about is there's a structure that we should try to follow to make sure that we don't invest as much, and we catch the failure as early as possible so that we can move on to the next idea or innovation. So this brings us to thinking about the techniques of innovation, or how to do innovation in product management. This is a very generic innovation process that I'm putting up here. And the reason is because everybody, I think, knows about this. Starting from the left, you empathize. What is the problem? You figure out what the problem is. You define the problem. You do some market research. You understand what's going on. And then you start going into ideating it. So like doing brainstorming, making a list of ideas that you think are good, and then you start eliminating them. Oh, this is possible, this is not possible. Going into prototyping it. After you have a list, you narrow it down to maybe 3 or 4 ideas, and you start to build it. You start to experiment with them. And the thing to remember is, when you start building it, you want to get out there and talk to your customers, or at least the customers you think would buy this product. You want to talk to them and see, does this really meet the need? Does it really solve the problem that you have built it for? So it's good that if you fail, I think that's awesome. That's what we're looking for. Because if you fail, you know where you need to change it. Either the idea is not great, or the way it's built is not great, or something small needs to change to make it successful. And then basically testing it, as I said, just making sure it works. It's a polished product, and it's not just, oh, we built it, let's just put it out there kind of a thing. So one of the techniques that I want to talk about is understanding growth opportunity. As a PM, once we have a product in the market, how do we innovate, right? How do we define the problem? So I think there's 4 different ways to look at the existing customers and then the new customers. That's 2 segments. Now, if you look at existing customers, there could be either a new problem that you find when you're talking to them, or it's an existing problem that you feel like you can solve it in a different way. So let's talk about existing customers, which has a new problem. And so it's basically, if you think about companies like Toyota, They were known for giving amazing cars, reliable cars at a cheap price. And they had a very good market. But when they were talking to their customers, they realized those are the customers who also would like to have luxury cars. Maybe that might have been a Mercedes or an Audi or any other ones, but they also realized that they can't afford it. That's when they saw that that's a new problem, and they came out with a new brand, Lexus. As you can see, they're still catering to the existing customer base that they have, but it was just a new problem that they solved for, and that's innovation. Um, if you go to the next one in the existing customer segment, which is the existing problem, here you want to make sure that you're focused on that, okay, this product has launched, it has either reached its peak or maturity. How can we increase or extend the lifetime value of it by bringing more engagement from the users or the customers, making the product performance even better than what it is now, or improving the user experience. And I think there's a ton of examples you would see that people do this a lot. This might be the most, this might be the area that a lot of product managers look at, because they feel like we can still extend the lifetime of a current product. But at the same time, I feel like you should also look at the other three segments. So moving to the next is the new customers. Now, it could be a completely new problem for new customers, which is like just radical innovation that we talk about, or new customers with an existing problem. So let's talk about new customer segment with new problems. So like companies would go here if their current strategy is in trouble. Perfect example is Nokia. They used to sell phones. They did not change with the smartphones, and the company was totally in trouble. Now they're more focused towards the telenetworking and things like that. It's a new problem, and it's a new customer base for them, and they're doing good. If you look at a new customer segment, which has existing problem, it's basically they know that this is the problem with this particular segment. Is there a parallel market with the same problem? And if there is, then they can just tweak their current product and put it in front of the new market, which is actually a great place to start and do innovation, because that just instantaneously increases the lifetime of that product. So one of them was on the cosmetic side, Avon. They were very focused in to women, providing cosmetics to women at like the age of 35 and 40 and above. But as soon as they saw that looking beautiful is not just a problem for them, it's also something that the teenager girls who wanted. So they started targeting their products, maybe with a little tweak, to the teenagers, and they're doing amazing. So you see how like you can look at different segments to figure out where the market is, and also figure out where you need to innovate to extend that lifetime value of your product or bring more revenue to your business. The other technique that I personally really like is 5 whys. And I want to make sure people understand that it's important to note over here that the purpose of this technique is not to place blame, honestly. It's more to understand what's the root cause, and like the way things are happening, what is actually happening. When you understand the root cause, the problem becomes so specific that the solution to it is much easier and simpler to find. If you don't go to it, you might be looking at so many different solutions that might not be the right solution and that might not do good to your product. So it helps to make sure that the changes we make to the product are very incremental. It's not like a drastic change, because now we have a root cause of it. And obviously, once we have the solution, we would also be able to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So obviously, 5 whys. Anytime you feel like you're stuck, you should always start with 5 whys. Why is this a problem? Why is this happening? What can happen, and why would we need to change it? Why are customers facing this? And then just keep going on. Um, Sometimes it does feel hard to get those answers, but trust me, once you dig deeper into it, the answers are so clear and the solution is so clear that you've just done innovation by going through that process of five whys. Then the last one that I do want to bring up is the Walt Disney method. Um, this is more of a method for brainstorming. And the reason I bring this up is a lot of time at work, people say, let's brainstorm. And they sit there in the room and they want to start brainstorming, start writing thoughts or ideas that come to their mind on the whiteboard. Honestly, that's not going to get you to the right product, right solution, right innovation. And I think there'll be a lot of people who will be frustrated by it. So this is just one technique. Obviously, if you go online, you'll find a ton of techniques on how to brainstorm. And I'm not saying this is the best one, but I personally like this one. There are other ones that are also done that are really good. I just feel like that Disney has had a lot of success with this method. I need to bring that up over here. With this one, there are three circles, as you can see. One, which is called the dreamer, the realist, and then the critic. The dreamer is where it helps to build a pool of creative ideas, and it's more of like the question on what can we build? What is the solution for this? And it's just start going crazy. There is no restrictions on it. Start putting down all the ideas. That's the hat you want to put in. Once you have put in some time, let's say 10, 15 minutes with the room, the next you want to do is switch your hats and put on a realist hat. This is more of you thinking as an action oriented, being more realistic in the world and saying, okay, now that we have each of these ideas, how can I make this possible? Logistically, is this possible? Then how do I make it? How can I achieve this idea? So it's all about the how over here. And then finally, when you spend time on every idea that you have, talking about how, you want to move to the critic side. You put on a critic hat and then you think about why. Now, again, keep in mind that this is not saying that we can't do this. It's saying that what are the weaknesses of this particular idea that would hinder us, that could be an obstacle, and start putting that down. How do we make sure we don't come across this this weakness or this barrier? It's discovering those barriers is where I would say you want to focus when you are wearing the critic hat. So the goal is to encourage constructive critics so that we can uncover the weak points and work on that. Once you have done this, it would give you a clear idea on what are the solutions that are easy to go through and implement, and you would just automatically be like gravitating towards that. And some you would know that would require a lot more energy, and you could put them in the back burner and say, let's revisit this. So this is a perfect way for you to like look at all the ideas that have come up, but also provide a structure to it a little bit. And then finally, how to innovate as a product manager. Obviously, you don't want to follow all these every single time. But in the back of the mind of a product manager, you want to think of what are the hard trends. Obviously, there are soft trends and hard trends. Think of the hard trends for the business, for the product, and then start focusing on the vision. Again, not the product, the vision of the product, what it's there to solve. Like newspaper, it's there to give information, not print. Newspaper, the printed newspaper is just a product. So keep that in mind. What's the vision over here? And then finally, balance today's sales with tomorrow's investment. A lot of the product managers forget that and they feel like, oh, this is great, this will do great. But you can't do that without any investments or selling anything today. So you want to keep that in mind. And that's why a lot of time innovation is more about incremental changes that brings value than like a drastic, disruptive innovation or like a change that we're looking at. Finally, I do want to leave everyone by saying that innovation needs to happen every single day, or you can do it every single day. It's not like you need to get in a room with a bunch of people and start doing innovation, and that's the only way. No. it can't happen every single day. It's the way you do things can change. So like, for example, start having stand-up meetings. If you're bored with just sitting there, start having stand-up meeting. Display around your table something that inspires you or something that reminds you of failure. Personally, we have had, I remember I've had failed products which we had to just cancel. And I've had those under my desk. Like every time we would have a talk, we would remind ourselves, like, remember that product, how it failed? And that's a way for a reminder to say, make sure you're thinking differently. It's not just one track that you have to go on and think about. Also, brainstorm with your colleague on small problems that you face every day. Like running to the meeting from one place to another is a hassle for me. Like those types of things. It doesn't have to be the big brainstorming sessions about a product. This is my personal favorite: get out of the office for a walk and start noticing things. And it could be things like, for first day, you want to say, let me see how many things I noticed with the letter A. Let me see the next day with letter B. Keep going alphabetically. And it's a subtle way because now you're changing your mind to change. It's the mindset change, which will help you in the products. If you come across a problem, ask yourself what your hero would do. So, for example, if Einstein is your hero, what would he do? If there's anybody else, what would they do in this situation? So you're now thinking differently than what you would have thought differently. Again, I like this one in a meeting. Try to use words like and instead of but. So if somebody's giving you an idea, you want to say, and it might be helpful to think about how we can solve the logistics side of it, rather than saying, but it might not work on the logistics side. You see the difference that and but can make? So you really want to keep that in mind, because that will just bring a lot of the weaknesses that we're talking about a certain idea. And then lastly, write down all the crazy ideas you get. Don't discount them. And honestly, it's not about crazy ideas at work. It's just crazy ideas personally. You see a problem in your personal life and you have a crazy idea, write it down. Whether it's a flying car, auto driving, those were crazy ideas 10, 15 years back. And now you see they are coming true. So you might want to keep that in mind, that how can we change our mindset to think differently? And trust me, that's what's going to bring innovation to the product as a product manager, and then bring innovation and help bring value or more ROI to the business. And that's where our job is. That's all I have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation and the talk. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach me on the LinkedIn. And just as a last note, don't be so busy that you can't innovate. Just think about it differently. And trust me, there's a lot of different ways that you can innovate in your personal life, in your professional life. So yeah, keep innovating. Thank you.